What if the greatest act of courage isn't climbing mountains, jumping out of planes, or challenging the system, but simply being yourself? It might sound simple, but behind that phrase lies one of the deepest battles we fight every day: the shame of being who we truly are. Nietzsche said that a truly free person feels no shame about themselves, and more, those who try to shame others usually have bad intentions. But what did he mean by that? Why does shame have such a powerful grip? According to the American Psychological Association, shame is directly linked to disorders like depression and anxiety. Our bodies process shame like real pain. It activates the same brain regions involved in physical suffering. That means biologically, feeling shame is like taking an invisible hit day after day. And the craziest part is, we feel this without even knowing where it came from. We just learn to hide parts of ourselves to appear right, normal, or acceptable. But who decided what's acceptable? Maybe this is the last taboo, realizing we've spent our lives trying to be someone others will approve of, while slowly drifting away from who we really are. And that brings us to the question that will guide this entire video. What if everything you call life is just a role you were taught to play? Shame doesn't come with us into the world. It's taught. When we're born, we don't feel shame. Babies don't care how they look or what others think. They just are. Natural, authentic. But over time, we learn to see ourselves through the eyes of others. This is what philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called the gaze of the other. The idea that we become self-aware by imagining how others see us. That's when the prison forms. Psychologist Brené Brown explains the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am wrong. Guilt can lead to growth. Shame stops us cold. It convinces us that deep down something is broken in us, and the body feels it. Neuroimaging studies show that shame activates brain areas like the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex, the same regions triggered by physical pain. In other words, shame hurts for real. It's not just emotional, it's physical suffering. And that suffering begins when we create an image of who we should be. That image rarely comes from within. It's shaped by voices around us: parents, school, media, society. Little by little, we stop living as who we are and start performing. We mold ourselves to fit in, to be liked, to feel safe. And the more we mold, the more we disappear. Until one day we look in the mirror and no longer recognize the face staring back. Nietzsche believed that every person carries a unique potential inside, a true self waiting to be realized. But that potential doesn't bloom on its own. It depends on the right conditions. Just like a seed needs soil, sunlight, and water to grow into a tree, picture an acorn. Inside it is the full blueprint of an oak, but if the environment is harsh, it won't grow. It may never break the soil. It might even die. That's what happens to us. Our environment, emotional, social, cultural, can be nourishing, or it can choke us. It can feed us or shut us down. Science backs this up. Epigenetics shows that our genes need the right conditions to express themselves. Without those, much of our potential stays dormant. And here's where shame comes in. Shame is the voice that says, don't be that, don't say that, don't feel that. It clips our branches before they grow. Every time we feel ashamed of what we love or who we are, we bury a part of ourselves. And the more parts we bury, the less we grow, until our life becomes a faint echo of what it could have been. Nietzsche would call that an unlived life, an existence in fragments, a being that never got the chance to fully become. Pedro was a sensitive boy. He cried during sad movies, loved to draw, and was deeply tuned into other people's emotions. Quiet, introverted, but full of life inside. But the world around him didn't value that. Pedro's mother used to say, "Why can't you be more like your brother? Strong, sporty, outgoing. That's what a man should be." It didn't sound cruel at the time, just advice. But what Pedro really heard was, "You're not right. You're not enough." And so, he began to change. He stopped drawing, stopped crying, forced himself to play soccer, imitated his brother, imitated what others called normal. Pedro started wearing a mask, a persona. Carl Jung called this the social self, the role we play to survive in society. The problem is when that role replaces who we really are. And this shift doesn't just happen emotionally. Neuroscience shows that the more we repeat a behavior, the stronger the brain's wiring becomes. Even if it's fake, it starts to feel real. Pedro began believing the version he was performing, but deep inside, something still felt off, empty, like a piece of him was missing. And that emptiness kept growing. Because when you trade who you are for who the world wants you to be, the only thing that grows is the distance between you and your true self. Pedro had friends. He went out, went to parties. To the outside world, he looked normal, maybe even admired. But inside, he felt invisible. Even surrounded by people, Pedro experienced a deep loneliness. And it wasn't from lack of company, it was from lack of connection. People liked the character he played, but no one really knew who he was, not even him. Psychologist Viktor Frankl once said, "Man is not destroyed by suffering, but by suffering without meaning." Pedro was suffering and didn't even know why anymore. A long-term study from Harvard found that the greatest factor for happiness is the quality of your relationships, but only if those relationships are authentic. Pedro's weren't. They were built on a role, not reality. And the truth is, behind many lives that seem put together, there's this same pain, the pain of not being truly seen. At some point, Pedro started questioning everything. The life he was living, the people around him, even the dreams he thought he had. He realized none of it truly came from him. He was just following a script someone else handed him. And that was the turning point. Pedro decided to stop performing. He didn't fully know who he was underneath the mask, but he was ready to find out. He began stepping away from relationships that only accepted a filtered version of him. He sought out people who embraced him without edits. Humanistic psychology calls this unconditional acceptance. Carl Rogers said it's the first step to any real transformation, being accepted as you are. Slowly, Pedro started drawing again, feeling again, crying during movies again, but this time without shame. And something changed. He began feeling better physically too. Studies show that living authentically lights up the brain's reward system. It lowers stress, boosts dopamine. Being yourself, besides being freeing, is also healthy. Pedro didn't become someone new. He just took off the costume and finally came back home to himself. By now, it's clear why Nietzsche saw shame as something cruel. It doesn't teach, it crushes, it doesn't transform, it suffocates. There's a kind of shame that can be useful, the one that helps us correct our actions. But shame about who we are? That's poison. Brené Brown calls it toxic shame. It doesn't bring us closer to others. It isolates us, and worse, it separates us from ourselves. It acts like a parasite, feeding on our insecurity, growing stronger every time we hide something true about ourselves. And the more we feed it, the less alive we feel. But there is an antidote, and it starts with a choice: to stop running from who we are. Remember the question from the beginning. What if everything you call life is just a role you were taught to play? Here's the answer. Maybe it is, but you can stop acting. Nietzsche believed that true freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's having no shame about who you are. It's living so honestly, so aligned with your essence, that no judgment, rejection, or gaze from others can bend you. Being yourself is risky. You might lose people, you might get criticized, you might make others uncomfortable. But in return, you gain something no one else can give you: peace with yourself. This isn't about ego. It's about real life, about waking up and seeing a face in the mirror that you recognize. In the end, the only life worth living is yours, fully yours. Don't play a role, don't shrink to fit, because no one, absolutely no one, can be you better than you.